Sandy, Matt, and Julio, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your speaking with me.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having
having
us.
us.
Why don't we do a roundtable of the three of you and have each of you talk a little bit about yourselves, your upbringing, musical and otherwise, what your musical activities have looked like over the years, and what you're up to musically now. Sandy, you want to start?
Oh my. Okay. Did you want to know from like when I was a kid or just what I'm doing right now?
If you'd like to include some information from when you were a kid, that would be great.
Sure. Well, I'll first start with what I'm doing right now. I'm a professor of practice at the University of Texas at Austin at the Butler School of Music. And I've been teaching there now for, goodness, I think it's going to be my 22nd year. So it's
Wow.
been a long time. Um, I started violin when I was 4. And I guess I've been playing since. I was in a string quartet called the Miró Quartet for 15 years. So I did that. And then after that, I just been focused more on teaching and performing with all sorts of people like Matt and Julio. And it's been a really fun kind of variety kind of career.
I saw in your bio that you did spend at least a little time with the San Antonio Orchestra
I
last year,
did.
although it sounds like you mostly focus on chamber music nowadays.
Yes, mainly chamber music, but I had a really nice opportunity last year to be co-concert master of the San Antonio Philharmonic under Jeffrey Kahane. And so that was a really neat experience since my experience with orchestras have mainly been chamber orchestras. So it was really nice to be in a full-scale orchestra and play the rep,
Yeah.
the bigger rep. Yes.
What is the balance of your career looking like now? Is it mostly teaching or a fair amount of teaching with music fit in amidst it?
It's a mix. I do a fair amount of teaching. This year, I'm also besides UT Austin, I'm also teaching at the University of Michigan part-time. So there's a lot of teaching. But I still try to perform chamber music as much as I can. Um, I'm not doing orchestra this semester. It's too much. I'm also the artistic director of the Austin Chamber Music Center. So I've been stepping into a little bit of admin work as well, which has been really interesting.
I'm going to circle back to that in just a little bit. But first, let's hear from you, Matt. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm currently in Madison, Wisconsin. I've been, unlike Sandy, I've been teaching at the Mead School of Music here for 1 week. I just moved over the summer. But before that, my wife Alice and I, who Alice is a cellist as well, we were in Denver for 10 years, where we started the Denver Chamber Music Festival, which is yeah, now in its sixth year. And very similar to Sandy, my career involves a mix of a lot of chamber music and a lot of teaching and a lot of other things in artistic direction. I kind of feel like it's one part of each, artistic direction, teaching and playing. So, and it's been, yeah, as busy as I could imagine. But one of I'd say Sandy and I met maybe 4 years, 5 years ago at a festival. And Julio and I have known each other for, I mean, we could talk more about this as we go. But we actually met when we were studying in New York together in 2000. Oh, God, it's been 20 years, I think, something like that. So we've known each other a really long time. But we were at the Juilliard School together and I was there from 2004 to 10. I believe Julio was there later, or started maybe later. And yeah, so that's a little bit about that. I was in a string quartet for again, not as long as Sandy, just a handful of years. And I think that about covers it.
That was the thing I was actually going to ask about the fact that you three live and work in very different places. And I assume that your paths crossed at some point, and I'm glad we're getting into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Julio, let's turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was actually kind of a late bloomer, if you will. I wasn't really serious about being a musician until I was well into high school. I almost became an airline pilot instead. But I'm glad that I chose music. I did my undergrad in San Francisco at San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and then I did my master's and my doctorate at the Juilliard School in New York. And then, I while I was in New York, it was an interesting experience because San Francisco is very well known as a chamber music school. They have really one of the great chamber music programs in the country. And when I left to go to New York, my teacher kind of urged me and said, you should really keep developing your chamber music chops because that's really where no person at Juilliard wants to spend their time. And you'll suddenly have, a lot of connections and work. And he couldn't have been more accurate. I made so many great connections like Matt, and then, later these last few years with Sandy. And then I had a really serious piano trio for over a decade. And so I think that was kind of the core of my training in that field. And then that segued into this kind of unusual niche of chamber music, which is I work with a lot of very well-known soloists. So like Ray Chen, Sarah Chang, Pablo Ferrandes, Kian Soltani, the really great cellist violinists. And weirdly, a very specific niche that my last piano teacher, Robert McDonald, was very well known for and is still well known for. And so it's kind of led me to this unusual, I think the one curious parallel that the three of us have is that we all teach somewhere and we all run artistic organizations and then we all travel a lot and perform. And so for me, I'm really lucky to be able to do all three of those things. I'm also the associate chair of strings and piano chamber music at San Francisco Conservatory of Music. So it's nice that I was able to go full circle, and now I'm back where it all started and doing my bit to help young students.
It sounds like each of the three of you have really varied and busy careers. Have you managed to find a good balance between one, the musical activities, and then two, just music and life?
I think we're all trying our best.
I mean, it sounds like a lot what each of you
It
is
is a
doing.
lot. It is a lot, but I think my guess is that we all like being busy. I think it becomes like work and hobby is all kind of mixed in together. But what we do, especially this chamber music, I don't know, for me, it doesn't feel so much like work. It's such a joy and it's such a treat for me. It's like, yeah, it doesn't really feel like something that like I have to do. It's something that I look forward to doing, and especially playing with these two, it's just every time it's like a dream. So I think we all try to balance. I have two children, but they are now a little older, so it's getting a little bit easier. I have one that's 19 in college and one that's 16 still in high school. Um, and I have two cats also that keep me pretty occupied when I'm home.
I remember years ago when I was a student, there was a kind of a roundtable discussion with Sir Stephen Huff, now Sir Stephen, and um, and I asked him this very question. I said, "How do you like? What is your system for staying on top of stuff?" And he's a big concerto pianist, so he's playing with orchestras and doing recitals all the time. And he said, very simply, he said, "I keep this piece of paper on the music stand, and it has every concert from now until a year from now." And he said, when I look at the end of that list, if I haven't started that music now, I'm just a goner by the time I get there because like there's just not enough time. And I think for all of us, especially with all of the different hats that we wear, um, time management is a skill of its own where you have to really be aware. Like, I think we all know our tolerances for how late we can be to preparing something. And so we all kind of, where that yellow light turns on and you say, I really should start, looking at that and getting it back into my hands and just to know that you're coming as prepared as possible to the concert that, or, whatever it is, if you're teaching that you're really ready for what's required of you.
That actually raises a thing that maybe people who are not involved with the music world, the classical music world themselves, wouldn't think of. But when you come into a chamber music situation, or if you're maybe an orchestral musician coming into your first rehearsal, it's not like that's going to be the first time that you have ever dealt with that music. You will want to have prepared well in advance, with luck, but certainly in advance, have yourself prepared to some extent so that rehearsals can go smoothly and you can deal with the details rather than learning a piece of music afresh on the spur of the moment.
I had a colleague recently say that someone was learning notes on the boss's dime. Uh, and yeah, that resonates for sure. And it's interesting now that in all three of us, our lives are include a lot of performing where we'll show up somewhere and have maybe one or two rehearsals if we're lucky, and then have to perform. And the pieces are epic often and huge and require our full attention. So, we feel, I think, is in this part of the chamber music world, we show up to the first rehearsal ready to perform
Yeah.
and show up with ideas and know our music that well. That is the goal anyway. And if we don't, we won't be hired back. So that's
Yeah.
is a requirement. Yeah.
You're mentioning all of that causes me to circle back to what I was going to mention before, which is the fact that each of you is involved, along with everything else you do, in administration to some extent or another, running chamber music festivals. And I've done a little of that here in Reno, and I know that some of what you do is actually music related in terms of rehearsals and concerts and so on, but a whole lot of what you do isn't music related at all, whether it's, budgeting or arranging travel and lodging for people or fundraising or ticket sales or whatever. There are lots of little details that you have to take care of. How do each of the three of you feel about that? Now, is that a world that you're comfortable in?
I feel like someone besides me should start that because I'm like the most novice out of the three in terms of administration because I just finished my first year and these guys have a lot more experience.
Well, I mean, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very lucky that I just finished my 10th year as artistic director of the Olympic Music Festival outside of Seattle, and it's a great challenge. I think it's a challenge that requires an enormous amount of conviction, and you have to have vision. You have to have support from, your staff, from your board of directors, from your community. And I think it requires a lot of creativity, because each of us are serving very different communities that have different preferences and different needs. And, what works for, let's say, my organization may really not work for Matt's, or Sandy's. And I think that's a lot of what we do is just kind of fine tuning uh, what is the most meaningful experience for that community? What is the way for us to remain as relevant and crucial to that community so that people understand why it's important to support our organizations? And then, I think we're all cutting our teeth as we go. And I will be the first one to admit there's a ton of trial and error every year. And like for myself, my festival just finished just a few weeks ago, and actually Sandy was there and Matt was there at different times. And literally, I think day after tomorrow, I'm supposed to have my first post-season kind of analysis with my team to go through every aspect of it and to say what worked in terms of advertising, what worked in terms of fundraising, what worked in terms of programming, and we kind of go back and sort out the numbers and kind of apply an analytical lens to everything so that we can, fine tune things for the next year. And you just keep doing that over and over. And I think at a certain point, some things start to work and some things don't work, and leave those things behind. And hopefully, you just find the right balance between all of those challenges.
I think Julio nailed it. There's not a lot to add to that, really. I mean, that is absolutely it. Every festival, every organization in chamber music, it operates with the needs of the community in mind. And you start realizing more and more, as you're running these things and as you travel around to visit all these things, that these organizations like Tahoe Music Alive, they just become fully entrenched in the community. and they become such a critical part of the community, and you start responding and learning to what the needs are and how you can grow and help create something even more meaningful every year. So
Let's talk briefly about the three of you and how all of you hooked up together, and how long has your trio actually been functioning as a trio?
Oh my, so I guess just like Matt said earlier, I first met Matt it was right after the pandemic, the first year after like when things were starting to open up again. And I met Matt at a music festival in Vermont called the Green Mountain Chamber Music Festival. And we got to perform together that summer. And I just really enjoyed playing with him. So I had him come to my university to play chamber music again with one of our pianists on our faculty as well, Anton Nell. And so we were enjoying playing chamber music together. And then Matt was thinking, oh, why don't we now go to Denver? And so we were going to go to Denver to perform, but the pianist that we were working with suddenly had an injury and was not able to join us. But right away, Matt says, I know the pianist we need to ask. And he called Julio, and Julio was available. And that was my first time meeting Julio, was in Denver for that concert. And of course, he was also amazing to perform with, and we had a really good time. And then I think shortly after that, I guess, um, did we play together, or did Julio and I, did we play the chanson together next? I don't really
Maybe
remember.
that was next. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then Julio and I played this, it's a concerto for piano and violin and string quartet. So Julio and I played this piece with the Miró Quartet down in Florida. And so I think it was after that that the three of us was able to play again. But it just seemed, I mean, it's really so fun to play with friends and so fun to play with people that inspire you that and as you know, we're really busy, so we don't get to do it often, but whenever we can, for me, it's just like such happiness and joy.
And
This is a,
I'll
oh, go ahead.
just I'll just add to that really quickly. I think the other thing is that what's nice is that all three of us were ensemble players in a past chapter of our life, and very serious ones, and to come together with that kind of really developed radar and passion, and especially I think all three of us have like a very high expectation of how we want an ensemble to sound. And it's not, I think often you will enter a group like this and you will, it'll go well and whatever, but I think we were really taking care of things with a lot of care, and to feel like everyone was invested the same way. And then that the kind of social aspect afterwards, with the meals and the post dinner cocktails and things like that, that's fun too. Then you really want to play together as often as you can.
On the musical end of things, as opposed to the cocktails and dinner end of things, on the musical end of things, are you able to tell relatively quickly when you perform with somebody for the first time whether or not there's a sort of musical compatibility that you're going to be able to work well together? Or is that something that sort of evolves over time? What's your experience been of that?
I think it's interesting how you can find right away colleagues who you realize something happens on stage and it's electric, and the audience feels it and it's electric, and you feel this connection that you're able to really communicate the message in a really shared language. And even in a way that you can't always tell from the rehearsal, but then you get on stage and you get into this space where you can really get to the heart of the message and what you're sharing. And I think that's something from the first concert that when you have colleagues who are operating in the same way. So I think all of us felt that for sure. So,
This is the sort of awkward question I was going to ask. Is it possible to function well with somebody with whom you don't have a personal or musical compatibility? I've read of, famous string quartets and trios that were around for a long time, but the members of the group really didn't get along particularly well with one another.
They have decades of experience together, those groups that started to want their own floors in the hotel and things like that, separate flights and but that's really, I mean, the old and sort of tired saying is that a quartet's a marriage of four people. And it really is. It
Yeah.
really is, when you're traveling together and you're making plans together, all the things that go into, that moment of being on stage. It's so many logistics. And so I think people need their space. But, we're a trio is great because we don't see each other all year long. And when we see each other, we're so excited to see each other. So that's very different.
If you don't mind, I'd like to change directions a little bit and talk a little bit about the music that you're going to be performing at Tahoe Music Alive. Three pieces spanning, what, the 1790s to the 1980s, I think. Starting with the Haydn E-flat major trio, one of the last trios that Haydn composed in 1797, if I remember correctly. Haydn being sort of the inventor and one of the early masters of the piano trio. Any of the three of you talk a little bit about what makes Haydn's trios in general and this particular trio special?
I mean, I think all of Haydn's music is just so innovative and so fresh, and he wrote so much music. But I find that every work is just crafted just so that there's something super charming about each work, and this Gypsy trio is no exception. Um, compared to all the other pieces on the program, it's, relatively simple, yet there's so much like emotion captured in the simplicity of the music. And, Haydn was in such a, I think, good phase in his life. He was in love, and just great things were happening. And the trio was nicknamed Gypsy because of the last movement that has kind of the Hungarian gypsy music feel. Um, so it's a real fun and exciting opening piece, I think, to start a program with.
Then you jump
Yeah.
190 years to Café music. Tell us a little bit about that. That might be slightly less well known in the chamber music world, although it has become popular in recent years.
Yeah, I can chime in about this. So, Paul Schoenfield is, really interesting composer because he's one of those composers who made an attempt to create a little bit of fusion with popular music, and it came in different ways. I think in this particular piece, there is this high octane jazz type of feel. He also has other pieces where he, tries to create like fantasies around klezmer sounds and stuff like that. Um, One curious aspect about this stuff is that a lot of people see it as sort of um, sometimes people will say it's like a little overly sweet kind of jazz pastiche. But I remember working with one of my professors at Juilliard who knew him personally, and he said to me that Schoenfeld was extremely emphatic about the speed of his music. And when you are observant about that as an interpreter, the music goes from, let's say, sounding like, very enjoyable jazz to this kind of almost on the verge of like flying off the rails kind of music. And it's very electric and exciting. It requires, a lot of courage on our part as a trio because we have to go all out. We have to really risk playing a lot of wrong notes and playing out of tune and all this stuff to get the spirit of the piece. But when the spirit is right, I think the audience comes away with an enormous thrill, and they always like we always get feedback that they're like, "Oh, that was my favorite part of the program." So we always like sharing this piece with an audience.
Seen Schoenfield compared to like Gershwin and Astor Piazzolla in the way that they bring popular music, jazz elements into a sort of classical setting and create a special fusion of all of those things, which can be done.
100%.
So, and then after Schoenfield, we move on to a chamber music masterwork from a little earlier from the 1840s, and that's the first of the two piano trios by Felix Mendelssohn, which I think is generally regarded as one of his chamber music masterpieces, along with the octet and pieces like that. Uh, Tell us a little bit about this trio and what is special about it.
I I think you nailed it. It is absolutely one of the crown jewels of the chamber music literature, the piano trio literature in particular. And it was from the moment it was heard, it was recognized as that from Schumann hearing it and saying, this is an absolute masterpiece of and the master trio of the day. And what this is a piece that all three of us have lived with for decades in past lives with many groups. And coming back to it again and again, discovering the layers within this piece, it's always a worthwhile project. And the piece is absolutely perfect. It's one of those absolute masterpieces that, you look at the structure and it's incredible, and you see the virtuosity in all three parts and how everything's voiced and how there's so much spirit, there's so much humanity and so much perfection at the same time, which is, I think, a really amazing feat. So it's a piece that we're so excited to share again and come back to once more. So, yeah.
It's sort of a cliche, but I'll bring it up anyway. You mentioned the fact that all three of you have lived with this piece for a while. Uh, do you still have the capacity to be surprised by revisiting pieces that you have played a lot, discovering new things? I mean, the cliche is that, every time I play a piece, I discover something new. But I guess it's a cliche, perhaps because it's true.
I can chime in about this. Yeah, it's disturbing sometimes that you can like my my old piano teacher who I worked with in San Francisco, who I just saw a couple days ago. He famously would he told me that he would every year buy a new copy of Beethoven's Final Piano Sonata, Opus 111, and he would relearn it year after year for like 45 years. And he said every single time it was a different experience. And I think that's kind of the definition of what makes great music, is that a lot of the times when I feel like I interact with music that's maybe not at that level, you feel like you arrive to a conclusion about what the spirit or kind of the organization of the piece is. You work through it, but you arrive there and it's just there. Whereas with stuff like, this Mendelssohn trio, it is like staring at the Mona Lisa. You're kind of pondering the shadings and, oh, why is there a blue there? Why is there this kind of slightly thicker line there? And every time you come back, I think especially for the three of us, since we're teachers, we spend a lot of time working with students, and then I think as time goes on, every year you have certain things that you start prioritizing in your teaching, and then you start working on your own, and you see these pieces through a slightly different angle. And then sometimes as you investigate or explore, or when we come back together, and also just being in a different place, like coming out to Tahoe will probably the altitude by itself will unravel some mysteries, but I think there's always something else that piece gives to you, and so I feel like you ask questions, and those great pieces, always produce. For every question you ask, it provides you another 10 that you can go into, and I think that's what makes music so special, is that after all these years we can come back to these pieces, year in, just over and over, and it's still meaningful and it's still enjoyable to perform them and then to share them with an audience.
I would imagine, too, relatedly, that each of you, with your individual experiences of this piece, when you come together to play it, maybe occasionally you surprise one another with interpretive ideas or experiences that you have had in the past. Uh, are you as you're putting together a piece like this for this particular performance, say, are you sort of crafting a new interpretation as you go? Is that essentially how it works?
I feel like with our group, it's like that because I feel like we don't just plan everything, but we're very much attuned to what's going on in the moment. And so I feel like we're trying to discover these pieces together each time we revisit the works rather than this is what we decided to do, so this is what we're going to do. I think that's one of the things I really enjoy. One of the things that is very important that I really enjoy about playing with Matt and Julio are that they are artists that can really be in the moment. So we also don't have to be speaking so much about the music. We can do a lot of rehearsing just by playing and just really focusing our attention to listening.
What is next for your trio? Is this a one-off performance that you're doing at Lake Tahoe, or are there other things or other ideas that you might have in the works for the future?
Well, they'll be coming to Austin in January, so
Excellent.
I'll get to see them again. Then I think that's the next thing with the three of us together.
There are lots of big discussions and big ideas and always things in the works. Yeah, so.
Well, you've certainly put together a great program for Tahoe Music Alive, a really diverse and interesting one that's going to be exciting for the audience, I think.
We're really looking forward to it.
Well, Sandy, Julio, Matt, thank you all very much for speaking with me. It's been a pleasure meeting you virtually, and I look forward to meeting you in person sometime.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having us.
Forward to it.